A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So we'll be doing our tafsir portion today of Surah Baqarah, ruku number 9, which is verses 72 through 82. Okay. So with the dua, which is Allahumma arinal haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'a wa arinal batila batilan warzuqna ijtinaba. O Allah, show us the truth as truth and give us the ability to follow it, and show us as the falsehood as falsehood and give us the ability. Okay, so verse number 72 starts with, so the discussion is continuing with the people of Bani Israel, right? So it says, وَإِذْ قَتَلْتُمْ نَفْسًا, and recall when you slew a man or when you killed a man, فَدَّرَعْتُمْ فِيهَا, and you disputed over it, right? فَدَّرَعْتُمْ means you disputed over it. Fiha, in it or over it. Wallahu mukhrijum, but Allah was to bring out ma kuntum taktumun, that which you were concealing it. Now obviously this is the story, that is being continuing from the previous verses that we were studying, right? Now the thing is that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here is, He is saying you, right, which is addressing the people of Bani Israel. Now, what was the story? There was a man that was killed, right? And nobody knew who had killed the man. So what was happening is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in this verse what we have already studied in one of the previous verses, which is that if you don't say anything when you see the wrong, right, you are part of it. Right, so that's a lesson that we are learning. It is, if you see something wrong happening, you need to be able to speak up to that. Now, what is happening here is that the word faddaratum, right, that basically means people were blaming each other. You did it. No, you did it. No, you said this. No, you said this. And they were disputing over it so much that they were about to kill each other over that, right? And that is when the people had gone to Musa alayhi salam as the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to say, can you help us with this? Can you help us solve this crime? Right? Now, what is happening is that what happens, right, when adults see something happening, right, and they'll come and ask a child what's going on. Sometimes, the kids start blaming each other. No, he did it. No, he did it. No, I didn't do it. No, he said this. No, he said that. Right? That is what is faddaratum, right? You start disputing, you start blaming each other. Nobody wants to take responsibility. Everybody wants to blame the other person. Now, what we also need to know is that we don't need to know the entire story of the details of how many people were there, who was fighting with who, what was the name of that person. That is not really important. What is more important is that we learn the lesson that is being communicated to us. Now, one of the audience of this verse are the people of Bani Israel, but the other audience is who? Us. You and I, right? The Muslims. We need to be learning a lesson out of it. And what is the lesson? The lesson is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always bring out what you try to hide. The other means of saying that is that always remember that whatever we try to do, right, Allah is going to bring that forth, right? In terms of if any of us tries to do something bad and says a lie, right, we sometimes have to say more lies to cover that one lie, but eventually the truth comes out, right? So the lesson here is, don't hide stuff that you think is going to embarrass you when it comes out. Never engage into activities that is going to embarrass you at some point in your life. Because truth always comes out at some point. It may not come out today, it may not come out tomorrow, not even the next week, but eventually it does come out, right? And then it becomes an embarrassing thing, or why something happened, or why I did something, or why I got involved with something. So don't do things that is going to eventually embarrass you. The 73 then says, فَقُلْ نَضْرِبُهُ بِبَعْدِهَا. So we said, strike the slain man with a part of it. كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَى. Thus does Allah bring the dead to life. وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. And He shows you His signs that you might reason. Now, the it in here, strike the slain man with the part of it. What is it? It was some piece of the cow. We don't know which piece it is. We don't have to worry about it. It doesn't really matter. But that is the link between that story, right? Or that is the link between those ayahs and this ayah is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, strike the dead man with a part of the cow. Now, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say that? Right? I mean, Musa could have said, here is the truth. Here is what it is. Why did Allah say that?
To show them signs.
That's true, but it was also a test of faith. Right? That you do this. You don't have to think about what Allah, if Allah is asking you to do something, right? You just do it. You don't question why. Now, this was a test of faith also, right? Eventually to show them the sign, right? Now, if Musa would have told them the name of the killer, they may have said, oh, he's making it up, right? But this was, again, as Ibrahim said, was a way to show them a sign. Now, what was the sign? When the person was hit with a part of the meat of the cow, of the slaughtered cow, obviously it is not in the Quran, but there are several narrations which basically say that he got up for a few seconds, he said the name or pointed to the person, whoever was the killer, and then he died again, right, for just a few seconds. So that was the miracle, that a dead person was brought up, he said the name of the killer, and then he died again, right? Now, what this means is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the second part of the verse that He will bring the dead to life. Just He brought that dead man to life, He can bring the entire humanity to life. That's a lesson for all of us that we need to take away, is that we are all going to become alive again on the day of judgment. What we do in this life does not end when we die in this world. Whatever deeds we do, good or bad, they carry with us and they will stay with us after this life till the day of judgment, when the judgment happens, and then you are either sent to the hell or to paradise, depending on how it all happens. Wallahu alam. Now, what this also verse offers us is the belief in the death, in the life after death, right? And Allah is basically saying, do you not, la'allakum taqilun, right? So that you might reason, you might understand that if Allah can bring one person to life, He can bring the entire humanity to life again. He can bring them, make them alive. Number 74 says, ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ. Then your hearts became hardened after that. فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ أَوْ أَشَدُّ قَسْوَةً. Being like stones or even harder. Now, in order to be able to apply the akal, what was the last word of the previous ayah? Afala taqilun, or la'allakum taqilun, right? Now, in order to be able to apply your akal, you need to be able to have a sound heart, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about heart in various places in the Quran. Now, there is a parable in Surah Nur which basically says, if your heart is like a mirror, light will go through it. But if your heart is like a rock, which is a hard mass, light is not going to go through it. And what is the light here? The light is the guidance, right? So if our hearts become hard, the light will not make any impact onto that. And what happens when your heart becomes hardened? You lose the ability to have any kind of obedience. You lose compassion, you lose mercy, you lose obedience. All of that is lost when your heart becomes hardened. Now, the hard-hearted person does not care about anything, right? So sometimes when I see the words being uttered by some of our young ones. And what are the words? I don't care. I don't know. I don't really worry about it, right? Those are some very common terms that our young generation says today, right? When talked about certain things. So one needs to think about is, has my heart become hardened that I don't really care of what is happening to me or things around me? Now, fed with too much of worldly desires, it gets hard. And we have to soften it with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Qayyim has said, if the heart becomes hardened, the eye becomes dry, which means you start, as I said, when your heart becomes hardened, you lose compassion, you lose mercy. You really don't worry about what is happening to anybody else. And that is not the condition that we want to get to. Soften the heart, right? Soft words soften the hearts that are harder than rock. Harsh words harden hearts that are softer than silk. What does that mean? Use soft words for people around you. When you talk to your siblings, when you talk to your parents, use kind words. Don't be harsh to the people around you, near or far, right? Don't be harsh to kids, to your own friends also, right? Don't make your hearts hard. So verse number 74 is continuing. وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ. For indeed there are stones from which rivers burst forth. And there are some of them that split open. وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَشَكَّكُ فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ. And there are some of them that split open and water comes out. Right? So this is basically, is really talking about different kinds of people, right? Some people have hearts where water gushes out. And some people are more extroverts. They are more inclined to do things quickly, adapt to things quickly. Some are tears only dry up as a result of hardness of heart, and the hearts only harden as a result of frequent sinning. Right? This is from Ali radiallahu anhu, or Ali radiallahu anhu. Continues, وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَحْبِطُ مِنْ خَشِيَةِ اللَّهِ. And there are some of them that fall down for fear of Allah, and Allah is not unaware of what you do, right? So what this means is that we need to be mindful of the fact and have that khashiyah of Allah, which is fear of Allah, right? We need to remember who is a muttaqi. A muttaqi is a one who has fear of Allah, which means he does things not to displease Allah, and then he does things to please Allah, right? So we need to have both fear of Allah and love of Allah. Is that Allah is not unaware of what you do. In today's day and age, we know we are getting recorded, right? Everybody knows that now. 50 years ago, people couldn't have imagined that, right? Today everybody has, or most of the people have a cell phone, a smartphone that has a GPS in it. You are being recorded whether you like it or not, right? And now it makes more sense. People 1400 years ago could not have imagined of how people can get recorded. How do you make movies? Because those did not exist at that time. But today we know every activity that you do today is getting recorded, whether somebody is watching you or not. Now, our parents may not be able to see it, but Allah always does. So remember that before you do anything, whether you are alone or whether you are with friends. Whatever you do, it's always being watched by Allah, and nothing gets unnoticed. Harder than stone, you soften your heart with Quran. By reading and reflecting the Quran, by remembering death, by helping people around us, by making dua, by attending funerals, by visiting a sick, by increasing in ibadah, by having a good company of friends. The people that you hang around with, right? Somebody said, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. Because the people that you hang around with is the kind of things you develop in yourself. You get recognized by the people that you hang around with. Those are the qualities that you will eventually have in your own self also, right? So we need to be careful of the kind of company we keep also. Verse number 75 says, أَفَتَطْمَعُونَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا لَكُمْ وَقَدْ كَانَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ do they hope, O believers, that they would believe for you while a party of them used to hear the words of Allah? Yasma'una kalam Allahi, which means hear the words of Allah. Summa yuharrifunahu, and then distort it. Min ba'di ma aqaluhu wa hum ya'lamun. Is the Torah after that, after they had understood it while they were knowing it. Now the word afatatma'una here means to expect, to hope for something good, right? Now basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to the believers that the people of Bani Israel, right? They're basically saying that, do you think that they would believe you, right? What that means is that the people of Bani Israel, they knew the book. They knew what was in their book. They knew their stories. Now and their book was Torah. So what was distorted? The distortion was that they were changing what was right and wrong. They were saying wrong is right and right is wrong. That's what they were telling their own people, right? And some people in the Bani Israel, now some were obviously true followers, but there were others who were not. And what that means is that some people will change the truth knowingly. The question is, are we one of those people? Do you change the truth when you know it is not the truth? And do you portray it as a truth? That's a question we need to be asking ourselves. Sometimes we joke around with things and tell our friends, oh, something happened. And then we enjoy them getting worried and enjoy them, taking that gasp and saying, oh, really, did that happen? Those are the things we need to be careful about, because lying is not okay even if you're joking, right? Is words or changing the meaning of those, right? What does that mean? For example, some people say, instead of assalamu alaikum, some people will say salam alaikum. Does anybody know the meaning of those? Right. Assalam means peace. When you say salam alaikum, it means death be upon you. Right? So you're cursing the other person by not saying it properly. That changes the meaning of it. Number 76. وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. And when they meet those who believe, they say, we have believed. Now this is a conversation that the people of Bani Israel are having amongst each other. Right? So this is not a conversation with anybody. They are having it amongst each other, which means that when they meet the believers, the moments, they say, we believe, we are part of you, we are your friends. But then, verse continues, وَإِذَا خَلَا بَعْدُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْدٍ. But when they are alone with one another, قَالُوا أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ بِمَا فَتَحَ اللَّهُ. They say, do you talk to them about what Allah has revealed? عَلَيْكُمْ لِيُحَاجُوكُمْ بِهِ إِنْدَ رَبِّكُمْ. To you, so they can argue with you about it before your Lord. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Then will you not reason? Now what does that mean? That means that what is the Bani Israel referring when they say, do you tell each other? They are basically saying to each other, do you tell these Muslims, when you meet them, our own stories? Because these Muslims are going to be saying that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, that these Jews, the people of Bani Israel, they told us themselves their own stories. And what were those stories? The stories were how they were saved from Pharaoh. The stories were how the sea parted. The stories were how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them Banu Salwa. In their own books, there is mention of the last prophet, right? They knew who the last prophet is. They knew where the prophet was going to come. And that is why they had gathered in Medina, right? Before Rasulullah came to Medina. So they knew exactly where the last prophet was going to come, what was he going to look like, what was he going to preach, all of that stuff, right? But now they are saying, now what were they doing when Rasulullah went to Medina? They started opposing him, right? And they started changing the words. And they said, oh, we don't really believe in you. Things like that. So, 27, أَوَلَا يَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا يُسِرُّونَ وَمَا يُعْلِنُونَ. But do they not know that Allah knows what they conceal and what they declare? So basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking a rhetorical question here, and it's sort of a warning that is to them. Reflection that we need to have here is, are we concealing things in our heart that we think nobody knows about and nobody would ever know about? And if there are things like that in our own heart, we need to know that there is at least Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who knows everything that's in our heart, right? Your parents may not know, your teachers may not know, but Allah knows. So whatever you do, always remember that, right? Reveal. Allah knows everything. Verse number 78, وَمِنْهُمْ أُمِّيُّونَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ الْكِتَابَ. And among them are unlettered ones who do not know the scripture, إِلَّا أَمَانِيَّ وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. Except in wishful thinking, but they are only assuming. Now, what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying here? He is basically saying that among the Israelites, among the people of Bani Israel, there were people who were unlettered ones. Unlettered means they didn't know how to read and write, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically saying here that the crimes of, what was the crime of Bani Israel? The crime of Bani Israel was they were given warnings, right? One after the other, but they continued to disobey. And the point here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying the word unlettered here, not because they could not physically read or write. It was because they thought they knew and they just made assumptions of what they knew, right? So the question is, ones. What does that mean? Do we think we know what's in the Quran? Do we think when somebody says, you need to study the Quran or understand the Quran, do we say, yeah, we know the Quran says, there is Day of Judgment, and yeah, we know, pork is haram, and we know, wine is haram, and we know everything, right? Are we the ones like that, right? Are we making those assumptions of what is in the Quran? Or have we truly read the Quran from cover to cover, right? Are we the ones who are making this assumption of how are you going to respond to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, on the Day of Judgment, when we have to answer questions about what we knew, what was in the book? Because remember, Quran is either going to be for you on the Day of Judgment or against you on the Day of Judgment, right? So we need to be very, very careful that we don't want to be the ones among those who are just making assumptions of what is in the Quran because we heard something or we assumed some stuff that this is what it is. How long I want to continue without the knowledge of Quran and Sunnah? How long do I want to continue with the knowledge of Quran and Sunnah? Right? We need to make that effort of being able to learn the Quran, and that is, alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair, for all of you for coming to this class and for making that effort, right? There are many others who have not even taken that step. So you have at least taken that first step. And then may Allah allow you to continue these steps as you are moving forward. So here is what we are going to do. Verse number 79 says, فَوَيْلُ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ. So woe to those who write the scripture بِأَيْدِيهِمْ, with their own hands, ثُمَّ يَقُولُونَ هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. So هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ, with their own hands, then say, this is from Allah, in order to exchange it. ثُمَّ يَقُولُونَ هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ لِيَشْتَرُوا بِهِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا. This is from Allah in order to exchange it for a small price. So this is the worst form of destruction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about, which is the practice of Bani Israel, which is that Allah has not given us the power to change the Quran. But what do? We change the interpretation of it, right? We say, now things don't mean this, but they mean that. That was 1400 years ago. Now things are different. Now we will do things differently. And that is again a misguidance that the shaitan has given us, right? We should not be interpreting the Quran, right, to our own desires and changing the meaning of the Quran, right? There are factions amongst Muslims that sometimes do that, right? But we need to be very, very careful in terms of making sure that we are not changing and exchanging the words of Allah for a very small price. Commands of Allah, okay? From that. Verse number 79 continues, فَوَيْلٌ لَهُم مِمَّا كَتَبَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ. Woe to them for what their hands have written. وَوَيْلٌ لَهُم مِمَّا يَكْسِبُونَ. And woe to them for what they earn. Now there are again, sometimes what happens is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that people who do that, woe to them, what their hands have written, and woe to them, which is what they earn. So anything that people do, right, that is changing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, Allah is basically cursing all those people. Verse number then goes on to say, وَقَالُوا لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ. And they say, never will the fire touch us, إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودًا, except for a few days, right? So this is something that we need to remember, is that sometimes, what do the Muslims say? Oh, it's okay, we are Muslims. Even if we go to hell, we'll go there for just a few days and then come back again. That's all right, right? But that is something that even the people of Bani Israel used to say. They used to say the same thing. We'll not go to hell first off, and even if we go, we'll be there for just a very little time and we'll come out of it after that, right? So we need to be very careful of this. We don't want to even go near it, don't even want to smell it. And be very, very careful of saying this when people say that it's just for a few days. It's okay, it's all right, I'm just doing it, everything is going to balance out. Verse number 80 then continues to say, Kul attakhastum indallahi ahda falan yukhlif Allahu ahda. Say, have you taken a covenant from Allah? For Allah will never break his covenant. Now, Allah never breaks his promises, right? We need to be able to remember that. What is the promise of Allah? That you will be punished if you have more of the bad deeds. You will be rewarded if you have more of the good deeds. And Allah is the only one who never breaks his promises. So we need to be able to remember that when we do any. Verse 80 then continues to say, Am taquluna alallahi ma la ta'lamun. Or do you say about Allah that which you do not know, right? I think this is what we need to do. And we need to be very, very careful when we say that. Number 81 then says, Bala man kasaba sayyi'atan wa ahatat bihi khati'atuhu. Yes, whoever earns evil and his sin has encompassed him. فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ. Those are the companions of the fire. They will abide therein eternally. Now, what needs to be remembered is the word sayyi'atun here means one single evil. So sometimes what happens is people sometimes say, I am doing all these other things. I'm going to all these halakas and I am doing all these other good things, that we do. But then, I can only do this one small single sin and everything is going to balance out, right? So we need to be very, very careful when we say that, because sometimes it's only that one single sin that takes us down, right? Sometimes people say everything else is going to balance out. I'm just doing this one single sin. So we need to be very, very careful when we say some of that. And what could be that single sin? Sometimes that single sin is shamelessness. Sometimes that single sin is, I don't pray on time, or I don't pray at all. Sometimes that single sin is, not following my parents or not being nice to my parents. It could be anything. But even a small single sin, even a single sin can sometimes take us to the wrong direction, right? What was the one mistake that Bani Israel did? They were arrogant, right? And that took them away and made them cursed ones forever. So we need to be very careful about getting addicted to one. Verse number 82 says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَنَّةِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. But they who believe and do righteous deeds, those are the companions of paradise, they will abide therein eternally. So what we need to remember is, we need to choose carefully what path do we end up taking, right? Is it the path to Jannah or to Jahannam? So the check that we have for ruku number 9 that we want to write down is, do I know that Allah is watching even what I hide? Do I know how can I soften my heart, and will I apply it? Do I need to learn the book in detail? Can I use I think statements in the matter of deen? Do I believe it's compulsory to do righteous actions to be successful? Right? So we just need to be very, very mindful of some of these things and make sure that we are keeping in mind that Allah knows everything. Okay? All right, inshallah. So let's make sure that you are recording your favorite gem at the end of this ruku, and we'll be doing the sharing inshallah of it next. So Rabbana Anta at-Tawwabur Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.